The message arrived at Station Omega during the third cycle of the morning shift. Ambassador Vexter was reviewing trade reports when his communication device began flashing with the urgent priority signal that meant only one thing: direct orders from the Galactic Council. Station Omega floated in the deep darkness of space, far from any star system. It was built for one purpose only: neutral ground, where enemies could meet without fear of attack. The massive structure held meeting rooms, living quarters, and everything needed for long diplomatic talks. Today, it would host the most important peace summit in 100 years. Vexter touched the device with one of his crystal fingers. His body was made of living mineral that caught and reflected light in beautiful patterns. Like all of his people, he valued order and careful planning. The message that appeared made his crystal form dim with shock. Emergency update: 2 Peace Summit Protocol 7. New mediator assigned by unanimous council vote. Species designation: human. Delegation arriving in 6 standard hours. Prepare appropriate quarters. Vexter read the message 3 times. Then, he read it again. Humans. The council had invited humans to mediate the peace talks. He activated his emergency communicator and sent out a priority message to all delegation leaders. Emergency meeting in Conference Room Alpha. Immediate attendance required. Within minutes, the most powerful beings in 3 star systems gathered around the crystal table. General Thokman of the Reptilian Dominion arrived first. His scales were dark green and scarred from many battles. Behind him came Counselor Yildara of the Ethereal Collective, her form shifting between solid and gas-like smoke given shape. "What is the meaning of this emergency?" General Thokman demanded. His voice was deep and threatening. "We have preparations to complete before tomorrow's opening session." Vextar simply displayed the message for all to see. The silence that followed was complete. Counselor Yildara was the first to speak. Her voice sounded like wind through empty halls. "This must be an error. The council would never invite Deathworlders to a peace summit." "It is no error," Vexter replied. "I have confirmed with council headquarters. The human delegation is already en route." General Thokman slammed his clawed fist on the table. "Madness. Pure madness. You do not bring predators to stop a fight. You bring them to finish it." The 3 leaders sat in uncomfortable silence. Each of them knew the stories about humans. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories. Humans came from a world that tried to kill them every single day. Their planet had deadly weather, poisonous plants, and animals that existed only to hunt and kill. Most species would have died out or found a safer world. Humans had stayed and fought back. They fought their own planet until they won. Then they fought each other for thousands of years. They turned war into a science. They created weapons that could destroy entire cities. They built machines that could kill from impossible distances. When humans finally reached space, every alien species had the same reaction: fear. It was a species that had spent their entire history learning how to destroy things. They were too dangerous to fight and too unpredictable to trust. "Perhaps," Counselor Yildara said carefully, "the council believes their reputation will frighten our factions into agreement." "Or perhaps," General Thokman growled, "the council has finally decided to end this war permanently. What better way than to release humans upon us all?" Vextar had been thinking the same thing. The border wars had lasted for 50 years. 3 major powers fighting over mining rights, territory, and old insults. Billions of lives lost. Trillions of credits spent on weapons and ships. Maybe the council had decided that gentle diplomacy was not enough. Maybe they wanted to end the war quickly and completely. Humans would certainly do that. "We must prepare," Vexter said. "Whatever their purpose, the humans will arrive soon. We cannot appear weak or unprepared." General Thokman stood up. His full height was impressive even by alien standards. I will have my security teams ready. If the humans try anything violent, we will be prepared to respond. That would be unwise, Counselor Yildara warned. Human military capabilities are beyond anything we have faced. Our intelligence reports suggest they could destroy this entire station without breaking hyperspace speed limits. This was true. Human weapons technology was decades ahead of anything the rest of the galaxy possessed. Their ships were faster, their weapons more powerful, and their tactics completely unpredictable. No one wanted to fight humans if they could avoid it. 6 hours later, the human ship arrived. It was smaller than expected. Most diplomatic vessels were huge, designed to show power and importance. The human ship was sleek and simple. It looked more like a courier vessel than a diplomatic transport. Vexter watched through the observation window as the ship docked. No ceremony, no grand entrance, simply attached to the docking port and went quiet. Alert, all station personnel. He ordered his aide. The humans have arrived. The word spread through Station Omega like wildfire. Work stopped in every section as beings rushed to catch a glimpse of the legendary Deathworlders. Security teams took extra positions. Medical staff prepared for potential casualties. Even the kitchen staff hid their knives. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. 3 humans walked out. The first was a male of average height, with dark hair and calm eyes. He wore simple, diplomatic robes with no decorations or signs of rank. Moved with quiet confidence, like someone who had nothing to prove. Behind him came another male, slightly taller and broader. His clothes suggested military background, but he carried no visible weapons. His eyes constantly scanned the area around them, noting exits and potential threats. The third was a female with intelligent eyes and the bearing of someone used to studying others. She carried a simple bag and what appeared to be recording equipment. That was it. 3 humans. No guards, no weapons, no show of force. Vextar felt confused. These were the terrifying Deathworlders that had conquered their own planet through pure violence. They looked so ordinary. The lead human approached the reception area where Vextar waited with the other ambassadors. His expression was polite and professional. "Good day," the human said in perfectly clear galactic standard language. "I am Jihan, appointed mediator for these peace talks. These are my colleagues, Minho and Sola. We appreciate the opportunity to serve." General Thokman stepped forward, his massive form towering over the human. "You are the weapon specialists sent to end our war." Jihan looked up at the general without any sign of fear or intimidation. "We are negotiators sent to help you end your war. There is a significant difference. Humans at peace talks," General Thokman said slowly, "is like bringing fire to put out fire. It is madness." Jihan smiled slightly. It was not a threatening expression, but somehow it made every alien in the room feel very uncomfortable. General Jihan replied, "Sometimes the best way to put out a fire is to remove all the fuel that feeds it. We are very good at identifying fuel sources." The human delegation was escorted to their quarters without further conversation. But as they walked through the station corridors, every alien they passed stopped and stared. The humans were here. The peace talks would begin tomorrow, and nobody in the galaxy knew what would happen next. The main conference room of Station Omega had been designed to impress. The ceiling stretched high above, covered in stars that showed the positions of every world involved in the border wars. The table was made from rare crystal that changed colors based on the emotions of those sitting around it. Right now, it glowed deep red with tension and anger. Ambassador Vextar called the session to order at precisely noon, station time. The 3 alien factions sat on opposite sides of the great table, as far from each other as possible. 50 years of war had created deep hatred between them, General Thokman represented the reptilian dominion. His people valued strength and territory above all else. Okay. They believed the strongest should rule and the weak should serve. Okay. To his left sat 12 military commanders, all bearing scars from the recent battles. Counselor Yildara spoke for the ethereal collective. Her people were spiritual and mysterious, claiming ancient rights to sacred sites throughout the disputed regions. Her delegation consisted of priests and mystics, who rarely spoke above a whisper. Vexter himself led the crystalline hegemony. His people were traders and miners who had built their civilization on careful planning and resource management. They wanted the rich asteroid fields that lay at the heart of the conflict. The humans sat at the head of the table. Their position was supposed to show their role as neutral mediators, but to the aliens, it looked like they were sitting in judgment. Jihan opened his simple briefcase and removed a single data pad. No ceremony, no grand speeches about the importance of peace. He simply looked around the table and began to speak. Before we discuss solutions, we need to understand the actual problem, he said. I have spent the past 12 hours reviewing your conflict. I have some questions. General Thokman shifted in his seat. In normal diplomatic tradition, the first day was spent on formal introductions and statements of position. Questions were considered rude, even aggressive. Ambassador Vexter, Jihan continued, looking directly at the crystal being. Your people claim mining rights to the Kethmorn asteroid belt. You have been fighting over these rocks for 50 years. How much have you spent on military campaigns? The question was so direct that Vextar's crystal body flickered with surprise. I do not see how military expenditures relate to our legitimate territorial claims. Please answer the question, Jihan said politely. Vextar consulted his data pad. Approximately 400 billion credits over the past 5 decades. And what is the total estimated value of all minerals in the asteroid belt? Another uncomfortable pause. Current estimates suggest approximately 200 billion credits worth of extractable resources. Jihan made a note on his pad. So, you have spent twice as much fighting for these asteroids as they are actually worth. The crystal table began to glow brighter red. This was not how diplomatic talks were supposed to proceed. Jihan turned to General Thokman. Your people claim you need the Outer Rim systems for territorial expansion. You say your population is growing and requires new worlds. What is your current population growth rate? General Thokman asked, scales darkened with anger. Our population concerns are not subject to questioning by outsiders. General, Jihan said calmly, I am here to help solve this conflict. To do that, I need accurate information. What is your population growth rate? The general looked at his advisors. One of them whispered something in his ear. Population grows by approximately 2% per year. And how many new systems have you claimed in the past decade? 17 systems, containing 43 habitable worlds. Jihan did quick math on his data pad. Your population growth requires approximately 1 new world every 15 years. You have claimed enough worlds to support your growth for the next 600 years. Why do you need more territory? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. General Thokman had no good answer. Finally, Jihan turned to Counselor Yildara. Your people claim the disputed systems contain sacred sites that must be protected. How many of your citizens actually visit these sites each year? Yildara's form shifted nervously between solid and gas. The sacred sites are not tourist destinations. Their value cannot be measured in simple numbers. Understand, they are spiritually important, Jihan replied. But I need to know how many people are actually affected. How many pilgrims visit each year? Perhaps 50,000 across all the disputed sites, okay? And how many of your people have died defending these sites? Yildar's form grew dimmer. Over 2 million in the past 50 years. So you have sacrificed 2 million lives to protect sites that 50,000 people visit annually. The crystal table was now glowing bright red with the collective anger and embarrassment of all three factions. This human was making them all look foolish with his simple questions. General Thokman stood up abruptly. These questions are insulting. Reduce our legitimate concerns to mere numbers. Jihan looked up at the towering reptilian with calm eyes. I am not reducing anything, General. I am trying to understand what you are actually fighting about versus what you think you are fighting about. Minho, the military advisor, spoke for the first time. On our world, we learned something important about conflict. Most wars are not fought for the reasons people claim. They are fought because no one stops to ask simple questions. What do you mean? Vexter asked, his curiosity overcoming his anger. We mean, Sala added, that most conflicts continue because people focus on emotions instead of facts. They fight over principles instead of examining practical realities. Jihan stood up and walked to the star display on the ceiling. With a gesture, he highlighted the disputed regions. Here is what I see. 3 factions spending enormous resources fighting over things that are worth less than the cost of fighting for them. He touched another control, and the display showed trade routes. The crystalline hegemony could make more money in 10 years of peaceful trade with the other factions than they could extract from those asteroids in a century. The display changed again. The reptilian dominion already has more territory than they can possibly use in the next 500 years. Expanding further will only create administrative and defense problems. A final change showed population centers. The ethereal collective could build new sacred sites in safer locations and serve their people better than trying to defend remote temples that almost no one visits. General Thokman sat down heavily. You make it sound simple. It is simple, Jihan replied. That does not mean it is easy, but it is simple. You are all fighting to avoid admitting that this war has become more important to you than the things you claim to be fighting for. Counselor Yildiraz spoke in a voice like distant wind. You suggest we have been fools. I suggest you have been normal, Jihan said. Every species does this. The difference is that some species learn to recognize the pattern and break out of it. Akstar found himself asking, what do you propose? Jihan returned to his seat and consulted his datapad. I propose we spend the rest of today examining what each faction actually needs versus what each faction thinks it wants. Tomorrow, we will look at ways to meet those actual needs without continued warfare. And if we refuse to participate in this examination, General Thokman asked. Jihan shrugged. Then you can continue your war. But you will do so knowing exactly what it is costing you and exactly what you are really fighting for. Sometimes, knowledge makes continuation impossible. The crystal table slowly began to fade from red to orange as the aliens absorbed this statement. For the first time in 50 years, the 3 factions found themselves thinking about their war instead of just fighting it. The second day of talks began with tension thick enough to cut. General Thokman had spent the night reviewing the human questions from the previous session. The more he thought about them, the angrier he became. The general arrived at the conference room early, his battle scars seeming darker than usual. When the humans entered, he was already standing at the head of the table, all 8 feet of reptilian muscle coiled for confrontation. Human, he said as Jihan took his seat. Yesterday, you asked us about numbers and costs. Today, I have questions. For you? Jihan nodded politely. Please proceed, General. What do you know of war? Real war, not the counting of credits and resources. You speak of our conflict as if it were a business transaction. War is about honor, courage, and the willingness to sacrifice for what matters. The crystal table began to glow with the general's emotional intensity. Ambassador Vexter and Counselor Yildara leaned forward, curious to see how the human would respond to direct challenge. General, Jihan replied calmly, you raise an excellent point. Perhaps my colleague Minho can better address your concerns about warfare. The human military advisor stood up slowly. He was not as tall as General Thokman, but something in his bearing made the reptilian take a step backward. General, you ask what we know of war, Minho said. Let me tell you about human warfare. He activated a holographic display that showed a map of Earth. This is our home world. For most of our recorded history, we were at war with ourselves. Not border skirmishes or territorial disputes like your current conflict. Total war involving entire continents. The map changed, showing different time periods. Had wars that lasted 30 years, 100 years. We had wars where single battles involved more soldiers than your 3 factions have in their entire combined military forces. General Thokman scoffed. Impossible. No world could support such massive conflicts. Our second global war involved over 100 million combatants, Minho continued. That single conflict lasted 6 years and cost over 70 million lives. It was fought on every continent and in every ocean simultaneously. The aliens stared at the numbers in shocked silence. Their current war, which they considered the largest conflict in galactic history, involved perhaps 10 million total combatants across 50 years. That is not the important part, Minho said. The important part is what we learned from fighting wars on such a massive scale. The display changed to show supply lines, logistics networks, and communication systems. We learned that wars are not won by the bravest soldiers or the most advanced weapons. They are won by organization, planning, and the ability to coordinate vast numbers of people and resources. Ambassador Vextar found his voice. You speak of war as if it were an engineering problem, because it is, Minho replied. The side with better supply lines wins. The side with better communication wins. The side with better planning wins. Honor and courage are important for individual soldiers, but they do not determine the outcome of large conflicts. General Thokman's scales were shifting color with agitation. You reduced the noble art of warfare to mere logistics. General, let me ask you a question, Minho said. Okay, in your current war, how many of your defeats were caused by brave enemy soldiers, and how many were caused by supply problems, communication failures, or poor coordination? The general paused. After a long moment, he admitted, most of our setbacks have been due to operational difficulties. Exactly. Okay. And that brings us to the most important lesson humanity learned about warfare. Minho's expression grew serious. Every war ends in negotiation, eventually. The only question is, how much destruction happens before people are willing to talk? Counselor Yildira spoke up, her voice like whispered wind. Surely some conflicts require military solutions. Some enemies cannot be reasoned with. That is true, Minho agreed. But even when military action is necessary, the goal should always be to create conditions where negotiation becomes possible. We learned to use warfare as a tool to achieve peace, not as an end in itself. Jihan stood up and walked to the holographic display. This is why humans were invited to mediate your conflict. Not because we are particularly peaceful, but because we understand the relationship between war and peace better than most species. He changed the display to show the current border wars. Your conflict has been going on for 50 years. In human terms, that is a very short war, but it is also a very inefficient war. What do you mean? Vexter asked. You are fighting the same battles over and over again. You take territory, lose it, retake it. You destroy enemy installations. They rebuild them. You are not fighting to win. You are fighting to keep fighting. General Thokman stepped closer to the display. We fight to defend our legitimate interests. No, General. You fight because you have forgotten how to stop fighting. Your war has become self-sustaining, continues because it has always continued. Sola, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke. I have been studying the civilian populations of all three factions. With your permission, I would like to share what I have found. The aliens exchanged glances. Studying civilian populations was not something they had considered relevant to military negotiations. Please proceed, Counselor Yildiraz said. Sola activated her own data display. I surveyed approximately 50,000 civilians from each faction about their views on the current war. The results were consistent across all three populations. Charts and graphs filled the air above the table. 7% of crystalline citizens believe the war should end through negotiation. 91% of reptilian citizens want their government to prioritize domestic issues over territorial expansion. 4% of ethereal citizens would prefer their resources go to building new temples rather than defending old ones. The silence in the room was complete. Furthermore, Sola continued, when asked what they feared most. The top answers were not enemy attacks or loss of territory. They were economic collapse, military conscription of their children, and the diversion of resources from education and infrastructure to military spending. General Thokman sat down heavily. The civilian populations do not understand the strategic necessities. Or perhaps, Jihan suggested, the civilian populations understand something that the military and political leadership has forgotten, which is what Vextar asked. That the purpose of government is to serve the people, not to perpetuate conflicts that serve no one except the institutions that have grown up around the fighting. Counselor Yildiraz's form flickered with uncertainty. You suggest that we are fighting for the sake of fighting. I suggest that your war has become bigger than its original causes. You are no longer fighting over mining rights, territory, or sacred sites. You are fighting to justify the fighting you have already done. Minho stepped forward. This is the most dangerous type of conflict. Wars fought for logical reasons can be ended through logical solutions. Wars fought for emotional reasons require emotional healing. Wars fought simply because they exist are the hardest to stop. What do you propose? General Thokman asked. Jihan returned to his seat. Tomorrow, we will present a comprehensive analysis of what ending this war would actually require. A sharing, but a complete restructuring of how your three factions interact with each other. And if we refuse, Vexter asked, then you continue fighting until you are ready to stop. Jihan replied. But you will do so knowing that your own people want peace, that your war costs more than it benefits anyone, and that there is a better way forward whenever you choose to take it. The crystal table had faded to a dull orange, reflecting the confused emotions of the alien delegates. For the first time in decades, they found themselves questioning not just their enemies, but the war itself. The alarm began blaring at 0347 station time, jolting everyone awake with its urgent wail. Ambassador Vexter rolled out of his sleep chamber, his crystal body automatically adjusting to emergency lighting as he rushed toward the communication center. The message was waiting for him, marked with the highest priority codes. 3 separate attacks had occurred simultaneously across the disputed territories. Extremist groups from each faction had launched coordinated strikes against civilian targets. A crystalline mining station had been destroyed, killing 200 workers. A reptilian colony transport had been attacked, leaving 300 families dead. An ethereal temple complex had been bombed during morning prayers, claiming 150 lives. Within minutes, the station corridors filled with angry voices and running footsteps. The fragile peace talks were collapsing before they had truly begun. General Thokman stormed into the main conference room, his scales dark with rage. This is what comes of peace talks. While we waste time with discussions, extremists murder our people. Counselor Yildara materialized beside him, her form flickering with emotional distress. The sacred temple of Velkara has been desecrated. How can we speak of peace while our holiest sites burn? Ambassador Vextar arrived moments later, his crystal form reflecting the room's red emergency lighting. My people are demanding immediate military response. They say negotiation is a weakness that invites attack. The three faction leaders stood around the conference table, their previous days' reluctant cooperation forgotten. Up to 50 years of hatred and suspicion came flooding back. The talks are finished, General Thokman declared. I am returning to my fleet to plan our response. Agreed, Vexter said. We cannot appear weak while our citizens are murdered. Counselor Yildara nodded sadly. Perhaps peace was never possible. Some wounds run too deep to heal. The T turned toward the exit, ready to resume their war with renewed fury. That was when Jihan spoke from the doorway. Interesting timing, the human said quietly. The three aliens stopped and turned. Jihan stood, perfectly calm, still wearing his simple diplomatic clothes. His expression had not changed at all. Behind him, Minnow and Sola looked equally unmoved by the crisis. Interesting timing, General Dogman snarled. Our people are dead, human. This is not a puzzle to solve. You are right, Jihan replied. This is not a puzzle. It is a pattern. He walked into the room and activated the holographic display. Within seconds, detailed information about all three attacks appeared in the air above them. The crystalline mining station was attacked at exactly 0330. The reptilian transport was hit at 0331. The ethereal temple bombing occurred at 332. 3 attacks across 3 different star systems, timed within 2 minutes of each other. The aliens stared at the display. In their anger, they had not noticed the precise coordination. This level of synchronization requires advanced planning, communication networks, and resources that no single extremist group possesses, Minho added, stepping forward. These attacks were professionally coordinated. What are you suggesting? Vexter asked. I am suggesting, Jihan said, that someone very much wants these peace talks to fail. Someone with the resources to organize simultaneous attacks and the motivation to restart your war. Sola activated her data pad. I have been monitoring communication patterns since we arrived. There has been unusual activity between certain military contractors, weapons manufacturers, and political factions that profit from continued conflict. The holographic display changed to show financial networks, supply chains, and communication logs. The aliens found themselves looking at a web of connections they had never noticed. Over the past 50 years, Sola continued, your war has created an entire economy. Millions of jobs depend on continued fighting. Thousands of companies exist only to supply your military forces. Dozens of political careers are built on managing the conflict. General Thalkman studied the data with growing unease. You are saying our own people arranged these attacks? Not your people, Jihan clarified. It's people who profit from your conflict. They exist in all 3 factions, and they have more in common with each other than with their own species. Minho stepped to another section of the display. Here are the individuals and organizations that have gained the most from your war. Notice how many of them have business relationships that cross faction lines. The evidence was overwhelming. Weapons dealers selling to all sides. Contractors rebuilding the same facilities repeatedly. Politicians whose careers depended on managing war rather than achieving peace. They have been manipulating your conflict for decades, Jihan continued, escalating tensions when peace seemed possible, providing weapons to extremists, spreading propaganda to maintain hatred between your peoples. Counselor Yildara, his form solidified with shock and anger. How long have you known this? We suspected it from the beginning, Jihan replied. Most long-term conflicts develop these parasitic elements. It's people who have no interest in victory for either side, only in perpetuating the fighting. Okay, and you said nothing, General Thakman demanded. We needed proof, Minho said. More importantly, We needed you to see it for yourselves. If I had simply told you yesterday that your war was being manipulated, would you have believed me?" The aliens looked at each other. The answer was obvious. "So what do you intend to do with this information?" Vexter asked. Jihan's expression remained completely calm, but something in his eyes changed. For the first time since arriving, he looked truly serious. "That depends on what you want us to do," he said quietly. Minho activated another section of the display. "We have identified the extremist cells responsible for today's attacks. We know their locations, their leadership, their planned escape routes, and their next targets." The tactical information was incredibly detailed. Strike plans, troop movements, equipment, specifications. It was more comprehensive than anything the aliens had ever seen. "How did you gather this intelligence so quickly?" General Tachman asked. "We have been gathering it since we arrived," Sala replied. "Human intelligence capabilities are quite extensive." The aliens stared at the humans with new understanding. These quiet diplomats had been conducting a complete intelligence operation while appearing to simply mediate peace talks. "You could have stopped today's attacks," Counselor Yildara said. "Yes," Jihan admitted. "But stopping them would not have solved the underlying problem. You needed to see who your real enemies are." Minho highlighted the strike plan. "We can neutralize all extremist cells within 6 hours, simultaneously across all 3 star systems. Complete elimination of their operational capability." "How?" General Thachman asked. "Coordination," Minho replied simply. "We are very good at coordinating complex operations." The display showed a plan of breathtaking scope and precision. Simultaneous raids, communication jamming, financial asset seizure, and arrest warrants. It would dismantle the entire war profiteering network in a single coordinated strike. "This is impossible," Vextar said. "No one can coordinate operations across multiple star systems with this level of precision." "Human military logistics can," Minho said, matter-of-factly. General Thachman realized what he was seeing. "You are not threatening us with war. You are threatening us with competence." "We prefer to think of it as offering you a choice," Jihan replied. "You can continue fighting the wrong enemies, or you can let us help you fight the right ones." Counselor Yildara spoke in a whisper. "What do you want in return?" "Your commitment to the peace process," Jihan said. "Let us eliminate the people who profit from your war, and you give the actual peace a real chance." The 3 faction leaders looked at each other, then at the humans, then at the impossible plan floating above their heads. "If we agree," General Thachman said slowly, "what guarantees do we have that you will not use these same capabilities against us later?" Jihan smiled slightly. "General, if we wanted to use these capabilities against you, would we have shown them to you first?" The crystal table began to glow with new colors as the aliens absorbed the full implications of what they were seeing. The humans were not just mediators. They were the most dangerous species in the galaxy, offering to use their abilities to create peace instead of destruction, and somehow was more terrifying than any threat of war. The joint operation began at exactly 1200 hours, coordinated across 17 star systems simultaneously. Ambassador Vextar watched the reports flow in from the command center that the humans had established overnight. Strike Team Alpha had neutralized the crystalline extremist cell on Zarian Prime. Strike Team Beta had captured the reptilian weapons cache on Thorax 7. Strike Team Gamma had dismantled the ethereal terrorist network on the moon of Velsera. Within 4 hours, 53 extremist operations had been shut down permanently. The war profiteering network that had fueled 50 years of conflict was gone. General Thachman studied the operation reports with professional admiration mixed with deep unease. "I have never seen coordination like this. How did your people manage such precise timing across multiple star systems?" Minho looked up from his command station. "Practice, General. Humans have been coordinating large operations for centuries. We are very good at making complicated things happen on schedule. Too good, Counselor Yildara murmured, her form flickering with nervous energy. The successful operation had solved one problem, but created another. The three faction leaders now understood exactly what they were dealing with. Humans were not just mediators or negotiators. They were the most organized, efficient, and capable species anyone had ever encountered. The extremist threat has been eliminated, Jihan announced as the final reports arrive. We can now proceed with genuine peace negotiations. But the aliens found themselves facing a new fear. If humans could coordinate the destruction of terrorist networks this efficiently, what else could they coordinate? What if they decided the alien factions themselves were problems to be solved? Vexstar voiced what they were all thinking. Jian, your capabilities are impressive, Tess, but they also raise questions. What assurance do we have that humanity will not decide to solve other problems with similar efficiency? Jihan closed his datapad and looked around the room. For the first time since arriving, he seemed to consider his words carefully. Ambassador, let me tell you why humans were really invited to mediate your conflict, he said finally. Galactic Council did not choose us because we are peaceful. They chose us because we understand something that most species do not, which is, General Thok_men asked. That peace requires the same skills as war: organization, planning, coordination, and absolute commitment to results. Sala activated a new display showing economic projections. Your three factions have spent 500 billion credits fighting each other over the past 50 years. The same period, you could have built the largest trade network in the galaxy. The numbers were staggering. Instead of destroying ships and installations, they could have built them. Instead of training soldiers, they could have trained engineers and scientists. Instead of mining asteroids for weapons materials, they could have mined them for construction. But building requires trust, Counselor Yildara said. How can we trust each other after so much hatred? You do not need to trust each other, Ji-Han replied. You need to trust the system. He activated the main holographic display, showing a comprehensive plan that took the aliens' breath away. Trade agreements, resource sharing protocols, joint construction projects, cultural exchange programs, and conflict resolution procedures. This is not just a peace treaty, Vexter realized. This is a complete restructuring of how our three civilizations interact. Exactly, Jihan confirmed. Treaties can be broken when convenient. Systems become too important to break. Minho pointed to specific sections of the plan to notice that every agreement benefits all three factions. No one wins at someone else's expense. Everyone wins by working together. The plan was massive and detailed. Joint mining operations in the disputed asteroid fields, with profits shared based on investment rather than military control. Cooperative research projects that combined crystalline organization, reptilian strength, and ethereal wisdom. Trade, routes that made war economically impossible because it would destroy everyone's prosperity. Most importantly, Sola added, notice the oversight mechanisms. This was the part that made the aliens most uncomfortable. The plan included human administrators at every level, not as rulers, but as neutral coordinators who would ensure the system continued to function efficiently. You want to manage our peace the same way you managed our war's end, General Thokman said slowly. We want to make peace inevitable, Jihan corrected. Right now, you have to choose peace every day. You have to resist the temptation to return to old hatreds. That is exhausting and unreliable. Our plan makes cooperation more profitable than conflict, more efficient than isolation, and more satisfying than warfare. When peace becomes the obviously superior choice, peace becomes permanent. Counselor Yodara's form solidified with worry. You are making peace as inevitable as death. Jihan smiled for the first time since arriving at the station. It was a genuinely warm expression that somehow made the aliens even more nervous. Counselor, that is exactly the idea. On our world, we learned that you cannot rely on good intentions to maintain peace. Good intentions fail when times get difficult. You must rely on good systems, systems that make war harder than peace, Minho added. Systems that make cooperation more rewarding than competition. Systems that turn former enemies into partners who cannot afford to fight. Star studied, but planned more carefully. Every detail was designed to create interdependence. No faction could withdraw from the agreements without damaging their own interests. No faction could attack another without destroying their own economy. This is not just a peace plan, he said. This is a trap. Yes, Jihan agreed cheerfully. A trap that catches everyone in prosperity instead of poverty. Cooperation instead of conflict, and growth instead of destruction. General Thok_Min stood up and paced around the room. What if we refuse? What if we choose to continue our war? Then you continue your war, Jihan replied simply. But you do so knowing that there is a better way forward whenever you are ready to take it. And if we sign this agreement, but later decide to break it, Jihan's expression became serious again. General, this system has safeguards. If someone tries to return to warfare, the economic consequences will convince them to reconsider. If that fails, the other factions will have strong incentives to stop the aggressor. If that fails. He did not finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Humans would be watching, and humans were very good at stopping things they wanted. Stopped. The three faction leaders looked at each other. Then at the comprehensive peace plan. Then at the humans who had created it. You are asking us to surrender our independence, Counselor Yodara said. We are asking you to trade the independence to make war for the prosperity that comes from cooperation, Jihan replied. Most species find it a good trade. After 6 hours of detailed discussion, the three factions signed the Omega Peace Accords, not because they trusted each other, but because they trusted human competence to make the system work. As the signing ceremony concluded, Dexter sent a private message to the Galactic Council. Mission accomplished. The humans have negotiated a lasting peace. I recommend we never invite them to mediate again. It is too terrifying to watch. The human delegation prepared to leave Station Omega the next morning. As they walked through the corridors, every alien they passed watched them with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Do you think the peace will hold? Minho asked as they boarded their ship. Jihan reviewed the signed accords one final time. It will hold because we made it more work to break than to maintain. That is the human way. We do not rely on good intentions. We rely on good systems. As their ship departed, the three faction leaders remained on Station Omega, studying their new agreements and trying to understand what had happened to them. They had come expecting war or peace, Instead, they had received something entirely different. A future where neither war nor peace mattered, because cooperation was the only logical choice, and somehow, that was the most human thing of all.